What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. My name is Chris Drago. I run a brand called Pathos of Things, and I am also a fashion designer and creative director. In today's video, we are going to talk about the true cost of running a clothing brand. I'm going to break down pretty much all of the expenses that you can expect, and this will apply to new brand owners and aspiring brand owners alike. As always, if you want to download these slides for yourself, join the free Fashion Brand Vault Skool community, and if you're looking for a little extra juice and more access to me, as well as AI tools and a private Discord, I just launched a premium Skool group as well. I'll leave the link to both of those in the description. So as I'm sure you know, starting a clothing brand requires careful budgeting. A lean launch can cost as little as $500, while a more premium collection may require $5,000 or more. I'm going to break down a few of the main categories of expenses, and then I will elaborate on each of them a little bit more in more detail on the coming slides. So the main categories I've identified that relate specifically to my experience are initial design and samples, production costs, branding and marketing, inventory and fulfillment, and legal and operational fees. Investing in graphic design, pattern creation, and prototypes typically costs between $200 and $1,000. If you're doing print on demand, that starts around $5 to $20 per item, while bulk manufacturing requires $1,000 to $10,000 for minimum order quantities, or MOQs. When I first started my brand Pathos of Things, I did strictly print on demand. It was a great way for me to learn the ropes, learn about fulfillment, learn about just running a brand in general, figuring out what types of designs customers liked. And it gave me time and experience, which in my opinion was really important and extremely valuable for me. I think if I jumped into doing bulk manufacturing and ordering samples and all that before doing the print on demand method, I would have made way more mistakes and fallen on my face more, and ultimately just burned a lot more money, which I'm sure for a lot of starting entrepreneurs and starting clothing brand founders, not burning money is like the ultimate goal. I know a lot of people start with very little budget. So even investing something like $1,000 for a small bulk order is just not feasible. For branding and marketing, you're going to have to pay for logo design, packaging, your website, and digital ads. If you end up going the digital ads route, I'll talk about alternatives like organic social media marketing, things like that. But for this, you'll often need anywhere from $300 to $3,000. If you are going to stock inventory and do fulfillment that way, instead of doing print on demand, stocking items up front can require anywhere from $500 to $5,000, depending on the order quantity and the warehousing. Obviously, if you're doing this at home, like you just have bins set up in your basement, that's going to be a pretty low cost, but you trade the monetary cost for time. So if time and space are not readily available to you, for example, if you work a full-time job and you have a small apartment, doing fulfillment and inventory managing yourself is probably not the best. And you're going to want to look into something like a 3PL or a third-party logistics program or company. And then for legal and operational fees, there's business registration, trademarks, and other basic tools like using LegalZoom, for example. I use LegalZoom to register my business. I'm based in California, but my business is a Delaware LLC. Getting more into the nitty-gritty now, for the initial design and samples, design and sampling are foundational steps, obviously. They set the tone for the product quality, brand identity, and customer appeal. Custom logos, prints, and visuals can cost anywhere from $100 to $500, depending on the designer rates. So I had a designer named Hunter. I'm not sure if it's one person or a group. They remain anonymous, but Hunter with a V instead of a U. I had them redo my wordmark logo, and that cost $500. They gave me a few variations, which is really cool. And then I gave them some revisions, and we ended up landing on one logo that I still use. I've been using for a couple of years now. that I absolutely love. It's the main Pathos of Things logo. I've seen people use ChatGPT or Midjourney to create logos for them. I find that this works for brands that maybe aren't so serious, or they aren't sure if the brand is going to continue long term, and it's a good way to start, I think. But generally, I find that logos created by really experienced and professional graphic designers resonate more with an audience than just using some very quickly generated ChatGPT logo. But I think as the AI gets more and more advanced over time, this is probably going to change, and I wouldn't be surprised if the graphic design role gets automated. I don't want to scare anybody, but it seems like the AI tools might be going in that direction. So in that case, the cost of custom logos, if you're just going to use AI, if you're going to use ChatGPT, for example, that's like $20 a month for the Pro plan, which is way less expensive than, spending $500 for a custom logo from a pro graphic designer. But I digress. Next is the pattern making, and I'm going to break down the graphic design and pattern making a little more in the next couple of slides. If you're unfamiliar with patterns, those are the exact specifications that a manufacturer will need to cut the fabric. It's like a technical blueprint for garment construction, and may run $50 to $300 per style depending on the pattern maker. So I hire a woman named Ozgor. She lives in Turkey, and she charges me $200 for all of my patterns, but that also includes a tech pack and 3D renders, and she uses a software called Clo3D, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Next is sample development. So these are the physical prototypes of your garments. The cost really depends on the materials, the detail, and the location of your manufacturer. When I work with my Chinese manufacturer, they usually will charge me a flat rate per sample, and that's anywhere from $80 to $100 depending on the type of garment. Like if it's a t-shirt or a really simple pair of cargo pants, it's usually around $80. But for more in-depth pieces or detailed pieces, it's a little bit more expensive, and that's usually around $100 to $150. The materials and the detail will typically impact how much time it takes to create that sample. Usually the manufacturer wants to factor that in heavily, right? If something takes them a really long amount of time, they're paying a lot more for labor, and then that's going to directly influence the sample cost. But like I said, if it's just like a simple t-shirt or something, or you're printing on a blank and they have blanks on demand that you can just, say, oh, I want this one or I want that one, then it really doesn't take the manufacturer that much time to get your sample made, so it's going to be much cheaper. Revisions and tweaks. There are always revisions and tweaks. I always suggest that you expect extra costs for design or fit adjustments after initial sampling. I try to get the sample right the first time now because I do an extensive pre-prep or pre-sample process with a Clo3D atelier. I'll talk more about that. As long as the Clo3D pattern and the visual, the mock-up is accurate, I know that I can just give that to the manufacturer and then they'll be able to make the garment exactly how I'm envisioning it. If you're using a mock-up pack or something like the Siegs mock-up pack, for example, I know a lot of beginning clothing entrepreneurs use mock-up packs to create their designs. That's kind of letting the manufacturer just wing it, right? So chances are you're going to get that sample back and it's not going to be exactly how you imagined it, or it's not going to be perfect. And then you'll probably need to say, oh, I need to adjust the fit of the shoulders or the inseam of these pants, things like that, which comes after the initial sampling process. And then you'll have to pay to get another sample made. The manufacturer might charge you less for additional sample revisions, but chances are it takes the company the same amount of time and the same amount of fabric to create that sample adjustment. So in my experience, at least, it's usually the same price for a sample revision as it is for the alpha sample or the first sample. If you want to hire a freelancer or an agency to do the design and samples, like I said, I hire a freelancer. Her name is Ozgor. Her information is in the free Skool community, and if you would like me to personally introduce you to her, I set up intros for all the members of my paid community. So check that out if you're interested. Freelancers are going to be more budget friendly than hiring an agency that does full package services. The agencies are going to have a much higher rate. It also depends on where the freelancers or the agencies are located. I'm based in the US, so if I work with a freelancer from overseas, it's going to be cheaper because you're leveraging the difference in value between the US dollar and the currency wherever that freelancer lives. Typically, hiring a US agency is going to be the most expensive. Elaborating a little more on the graphic design, this, like I was saying before, includes the logos, maybe apparel prints if you're screen printing on a t-shirt or a hoodie, for example, website assets, and marketing visuals. So the cost here is going to depend strictly on the designer's experience, complexity of work, and number of deliverables. Also, what will affect the price is if they are overseas or not. If you're based in the US, it's pretty much always going to be cheaper to hire an overseas graphic designer than it will be if you hire a US-based designer. Apparel graphics like t-shirt prints and embroidery artwork will typically cost anywhere from $50 to $150, especially if the designs are hand-drawn or highly detailed. When I was first starting out, I did the whole logo on a hoodie, logo on a t-shirt thing that most brands do when they're first starting. But I also drew my own graphics. I made anime-inspired graphics from scratch, custom in Adobe Illustrator, and then I printed those on blanks. Specifically, I printed on a Bella Canvas 3001 blank, which was sourced through Printful, which was a print-on-demand company, which I'll talk a little bit more about. This was great for me because I didn't have to pay a designer to make the apparel graphics. I was just making the graphics myself. Next, for brand guidelines, this is also something that I recommend you do yourself rather than hiring. But if you really have no creative direction chops at all, it might be good to hire someone at least for the first project so you can kind of get an idea of how a creative director would put together brand guidelines. If you're curious, I have several videos about brand guidelines and design systems, and I have lots of templates that you can just copy into Figma or PowerPoint and follow along to create your own brand guidelines, which includes your logo, typography, colors, things like that. Most designers will let you do 2 to 3 revisions, at least in my experience, and then they'll charge you more if you need more revisions. But as long as you are articulating your idea well enough, I don't think you'll need more than 2 revisions. I never needed more than 2 revisions because I would approach that graphic designer with a very clear set of guidelines and rules for them to follow. So that way they could best execute on my vision, and I'm not just leaving my vision in the hands of random graphic designer that I hired. And then again, I won't harp on this too much, but freelancer versus agency. I always recommend starting with a freelancer. There's nothing wrong with going on Fiverr or Upwork and looking for freelance graphic designers, or going on Instagram, and usually they'll say commissions open or commissions closed in the bio of their page. And for anyone with open commissions, you can just send them a DM and say, hey, I'm looking to hire you, let's talk rates, and they'll hit you back. So to go more in depth on the pattern making, like I was saying about Osgore, she's an atelier and she uses Clo 3D. And when using a Clo 3D atelier, the pattern making is all digital. So you don't have to order test fabric. You don't need to cut any fabric. It's zero waste. And in my opinion, it's the future and it's here to stay. These technical blueprints or patterns are really essential for accurate garment construction and virtual prototyping. So like I was saying before, as long as the Clo 3D patterns and virtual mock-ups are accurate and look how I want them to look, I can just give that to the manufacturer and then they just follow the patterns and follow my tech pack and then make the garment exactly how I envision it. This typically costs $100 to $300 per style. It costs me $200 when I work with Osgore, but this doesn't just include the patterns. It also includes the fit simulation on a virtual avatar, which reduces the sample rounds and physical waste, which is great. You can post that you are eco-friendly on your social media and your website. You can include that in the about page of your brand on your website and say that you do zero waste sampling. But also, Osgore includes a tech pack, which is essential when sending that to a manufacturer. So the combination of having a pattern sheet with specific dimensions that the manufacturer can cut or feed into a machine and then have the machine cut the fabric, as well as a tech pack, is great for making sure they have the complete picture of how you want your garment to be made and cut and sewn and stitched and everything. Simple t-shirts, like I was saying, are always going to cost less. Multi-piece garments like jackets or dresses are more expensive due to added detailing, more fabric, and it just takes more time. I have Osgore send me editable files for Clo3D, so I can open the pattern files in my own Clo3D if I want, or I know my manufacturer specifically has Clo3D in-house, and they have an in-house designer that can open up the Clo3D pattern file, and then that just gives them more context and more things to work with. And if they need to make any last minute changes to the pattern, they can just do that from directly within Clo3D, or I can do it within Clo3D instead of having to hire Osgore to make more revisions. Next is sample development. So this includes providing the physical prototype, like I just mentioned, with details about fit, construction, and design accuracy before bulk production. There are 5 aspects that directly influence the cost. So cost of materials, premium fabrics, linings, and trims raise the cost per sample. Premium fabrics are like silk, anything other than just like basic cotton. Synthetic fibers also might be a little bit more expensive. Linings add extra fabric, which just directly translates to extra cost, and also increases the weight of the sample, and then you might pay more for shipping if the product is heavier. And trims, these are things like zippers, buttons. Trims need to be sourced, and then they need to be added and stitched into the garment. So if you have a bunch of different trims with custom buttons and custom zippers, things like that, that's going to increase the cost of the sample. If you are hiring, let's say, an Italian atelier, and they're very skilled with decades of experience, that's going to increase your cost. Skilled tailors or technical developers demand higher fees. The manufacturer location directly influences the cost. Samples made locally cost more, but typically offer better communication and turnaround speed. At least in my experience working with US manufacturers, the samples were 5 times the price, but the manufacturer was in my time zone, so there was some synergy there. But I will say also the US manufacturers, at least in my experience, were not better at communicating in general than the one Chinese manufacturer that I trust and have been using for years. So I'm going to try a few different American manufacturers again in the near future, and then I can keep you guys updated and let you know how that goes. Next is production costs. So production is the most variable cost, meaning it could be really expensive or really cheap, and that's directly influenced by the quantity, so how many pieces you order, the quality of the fabric, and the method of production and shipping. Your choice between print on demand and bulk manufacturing impacts upfront investment and scalability. So if you do print on demand, like using something like Printful or Printify or Scalable Press, it's very low risk. You don't need to order any inventory, and the per item cost ranges from $5 to $20. So the way that works is you list a product on your website, someone buys it, then that order gets sent to the print on demand company where they will print and ship your product for you. On the other hand, you have bulk manufacturing, which requires upfront orders, usually $1,000 to $10,000, depending on quantity and complexity. If you're just doing like a 50-piece MOQ for a pair of pants, that'll usually cost you, I don't know, maybe around $1,000. At least in my experience, it's come out to around $1,000 or maybe around $20 per piece. If you want access to an overseas manufacturer with a 50-piece MOQ, let me know in the Skool community. I share all the details about my manufacturer, and I also make personalized introductions for the paid Skool members. The cost per unit will decrease if you order more pieces. So if you order 50 pieces, it's going to be more expensive per piece than if you order 500 pieces. In my experience, that cost decreases drastically as you order more. So you kind of get into this feedback loop over time. As you make more sales and you expand the business, then you order more pieces, and then it gets less expensive to order those pieces, and then you have higher profit margins, and then the brand really starts to scale and grow. Another thing to note is that labels, embroidery, or any kind of special fabrics will significantly raise the base costs per piece. This applies to both print on demand and bulk manufacturing. Adding a printed label on a t-shirt might increase the price for print on demand by like $4, which is actually crazy. If you're selling a $20 or $30 t-shirt, adding an extra $4 to your upfront costs will eat up your margins significantly. I find that it doesn't make as much of an impact if you're doing bulk manufacturing. Adding labels tends to mess up the margins more with print on demand. Next is inventory and fulfillment costs. So this pretty much involves all the storing, organizing, and shipping of the products, otherwise known as operations. Costs depend on your sales volume, the storage needs, and whether you handle fulfillment in-house or if you outsource it. We already kind of touched on how much it will cost for upfront inventory, but for warehousing fees, the storage facilities charge monthly, usually $50 to $500 depending on space and location. I use a 3PL company called Pietra. They charge me $55 a month to house my products in their bins. Like the fulfillment services, outsourcing to a 3PL typically costs per item shipped, which is usually between $2 and $5, plus postage. If you offer free shipping, you're going to pay for shipping yourself. And if you have small orders, like you have one order every day or every couple days, you're going to get hit with small order fees. An in-house setup is where you fulfill everything from home. So you might have bins where you separate your inventory by size and color. This is cheaper initially, but it limits your scalability because it takes a ton of time to pack and ship orders manually. So if you're moving high volume, it's better to outsource to a 3PL. And there are also costs in regard to returns. So if a customer is returning an item to your 3PL company or warehouse, they're going to charge you for returns. And then also returns just eat up your time if you're handling it yourself and you're self-fulfilling. Handling returns and refunds is a huge pain in the ass. And that's one of the major benefits of having a 3PL because they make it pretty simple. Last week, someone returned a pair of pants that I sell on my site because they didn't quite fit. Pietra processed the return for me, sent them a return slip, and then the customer just sent the pants back. They were refunded, and then they placed an order for the right size. So that was really painless for me and one of the major benefits of using a 3PL like Pietra. Next is branding and marketing, which are super essential if you're going to stand out and be competitive. One of the key aspects of being a competitive brand is having a competitive website. I use Shopify. Shopify charges me, I believe, $40 a month, and I paid $300 for a premium theme. Custom sites on other platforms or even within Shopify, if you hire a company to build the site for you, those sites can exceed $1,000 in costs. Next is packaging and labels. I was thinking about putting this in the operations slide or even the bulk production slide, but I included it in here. The packaging and labels will include custom tags, boxes, and poly mailers, which will typically cost between $100 and $500 for small batches. I personally order custom hang tags, custom stickers, custom frosted zipper bags, which the garments are put into, custom tissue paper wrapped around the zipper bags, and poly mailers. So then the whole package is put into a poly mailer, and then that is what gets shipped to the customer. Custom packaging can get really expensive if you overdo it, especially if you're ordering like boxes. I think boxes are kind of overkill sometimes and will eat up the margins, especially if you're doing custom poly mailers and boxes or custom zipper bags and boxes. I have a whole video about packaging that I highly recommend that you watch, which kind of breaks down how I approach packaging and how I save money on packaging. And next is digital ads. So running social media ads like Meta ads, TikTok ads, or Google ads, to run it effectively starts at around $100 to $1,000 per month. Really, I think if you're going to be cooking the algorithm and getting enough data in there to make sales, you should be running like $100 per day. Just in my opinion and my experience, having worked for several different digital marketing agencies and having spent over $1 million on TikTok and Meta ads alone. So yeah, I think if you don't have that kind of budget, it's probably not a great idea to go into paid ads right away. Instead, I recommend focusing on social media content, organic social media content. So going out of your way to make really high quality visuals, or even if it's not super high quality, just something candid that will connect with an audience. Candid TikTok videos tend to do pretty well. I've had a couple of TikTok videos go viral just from filming clips in my backyard and then putting overlays of high quality photos from a photo shoot I did. Those types of videos work really well. And influencer partnerships. This could be by DMing influencers on Instagram, or even just sending out clothes to your friends and asking for reviews and photos and videos in return. They might not be professional influencers, but they're still influencers per se if they're highlighting a product, then you use that for promotional materials. I think getting your friends to wear your clothes and then getting photos and videos of that and putting it on your social media and on your website is a great way to build trust. It's going to seriously increase sales and decrease the amount of ad spend required too if you end up going with the digital advertising route. Next, we have legal and operational fees like business registration. Filing fees for LLCs or sole proprietorships typically cost anywhere from $50 to $500. I used LegalZoom and it was pretty inexpensive. So if you're in the US, I recommend using something like LegalZoom. Next is trademark filing. Protecting your brand name and logo can cost $250 to $750 per class in the US. Accounting tools like QuickBooks or Wave can cost anywhere from $10 to $50 a month. Contracts and agreements like legal templates or consultations can run several $100s. But in the beginning stages, you're probably not going to have to worry so much about contracts and agreements. That's definitely something more down the line. So if you're just starting, like, don't get overwhelmed by all of these legal and operational fees. A lot of brands, when they're first starting, like, don't even file a trademark or anything like that. But if you are going to be selling on Shopify, for example, you will need to register the business and get an EIN number so you can open a bank account and then collect payments. You don't want to be just collecting payments and importing that directly into like a private savings or checking account. The IRS is not going to like that, and your bank might actually freeze your account. I ran into something like this several years ago. I was selling some info products online, and I had tens of thousands of dollars just pumped into my personal checking account pretty quickly. It was all legit. I was selling an online course. My banker told me that if I didn't set up an LLC and get a specific EIN number for that online course company, they were going to freeze my account, freeze my assets. So just totally avoid that completely. Just go through the proper business registration process. It's super easy to do. Again, use something like LegalZoom, and it'll save you a ton of headache. And then essential licenses. Some states, countries require resale permits or fashion-specific licenses. Chances are you're probably not going to have to worry about this. If you are not from the US, I'm sorry, but I don't really think I can help you that much. You're going to have to Google it or use something like ChatGPT to help you out, just because I'm unfamiliar with the essential licenses and laws related to other countries outside the US, and I don't want to potentially steer anyone in the wrong direction. So in conclusion, the total costs here range anywhere from $1,800 to around $22,000, depending on scale, quality, and business model. If you are just starting out, it's very easy to keep these costs low, but that doesn't mean that you will have an easy time making sales. Typically, I think that the more you invest into it, the more you get out of it. But I also don't recommend just like blowing all of your money or your whole check or your life savings on starting a brand. Starting small and learning the ropes, in my opinion, is always the way to go. You will make lots of mistakes. You will learn a lot of hard lessons, and it's better to learn hard lessons with smaller amounts of money than your whole paycheck or your life savings. Start small, expand over time. It'll be very worth it for you, and it'll save you a ton of headache. Overall, the most cost-effective methods, if you really are trying to keep the budget as low as possible, are going with print on demand in the beginning, so that way you completely avoid inventory costs, and you don't have to worry about MOQs or negotiating bulk orders with a manufacturer. Hiring a Clo3D designer will reduce the need for lots of physical sample revisions, and you won't need to cut real fabric, or you won't need to know how to sew. This ultimately is going to reduce the amount of shipping expenses and sample expenses. Hiring a freelance designer is more affordable than going with an agency for logos or web design. Hiring someone like Hunter to get a really high quality professional logo and then buying a premium Shopify theme, that might cost you around $800 total, but it's going to save you a ton of time. It's going to look super competitive, and you're not going to have to worry about hiring a really expensive agency that might charge you $5,000 for a website build. DIY platforms like Shopify, Canva, and Printful are super low cost. Canva for branding, Shopify for e-commerce, and Printful for fulfillment and operation. And then organic marketing, like I was saying, instead of going all in on paid ads in the beginning, you don't need to just start running paid ads in order to have a successful clothing brand. You can sell out a collection completely organic. So build your brand with social media presence, organic content, influencer partnerships, even if that's just working with your friends and getting them to give you a review or a testimonial and some photos or videos of them wearing the clothes. And then community engagement. So building like an Instagram, whether that's a personal Instagram or a brand Instagram, that's going to get you much further, in my experience, than just coming out the gate with paid ads or hiring a media buyer or hiring a marketing agency, for example. That all can come later. And as you start making more money and you have more money to invest back into the brand, hiring something like a media buyer or a digital marketing agency will be great for saving time and scaling the brand. But until you get that proof of concept, it's really not worth it. So that's my video about the true cost of running a clothing brand. I hope you found this helpful. Please like and subscribe if you did find it helpful, and be sure to check out my Skool communities. Again, I have a free Skool community and a paid community. There's a ton of value in both, and I look forward to connecting with you, and be on the lookout for the next video. Thank you.